FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and guess what? It's the 13th of January, 2020. Well, you know, we've been following this situation in Virginia. We've got an activist Bloomberg financed state legislature that is out to eliminate all semblance or remnants of the Second Amendment. And there is a popular uprising taking place, complete with Second Amendment sanctuary counties, cities, towns, etc. Hey, if you want to find out more about this, or you want to tell us your opinion, where it's heading, simply email us. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. And now Dr. John R. Lott Jr. is with us now. You know him well from his seminal study, More Guns, Less Crime. John, great to have you back on.
Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you again.
As always. So, what's happening in Virginia? It looks like the gun grabbers have pushed just a little bit too far. It's a bridge too far, and the people have had it.
Right. Well, I guess it would have been nice if a few more of them have showed up during the election last fall. Then they wouldn't have to be quite as worried about it right now. I mean, even have a huge crowd show up at different county council meetings and city council meetings across the state. I guess something like 87 of the 95 counties are declaring themselves to be sanctuary counties with regard to not saying that the sheriffs won't enforce the state gun control laws that are going to be passed. You have had other cities in the state, in the counties, and those counties that haven't agreed to do that are also saying that the cities won't enforce those laws. So, I mean, there's been a fair amount of pushback on it. Virginia is going to go from a state that is relatively sympathetic to letting people defend themselves against violent crime to a situation where they're going to be one of the more restrictive states. And as you say, Bloomberg spent a huge amount of money, millions of dollars in some state legislative races, which is kind of unheard of. But he was able to flip the state Senate by one seat. So the Democrats, rather than being down one seat, are now up one seat. And the votes look like they're likely to be straight on party lines.
Mm-hmm. So do you think they're hearing the people? I mean, it seems like a lot of people are really enraged. They're having a demonstration at the state capitol shortly, I think this weekend or last weekend. It seems like the people are mad as hell and not going to take it anymore.
Right. Well, I think what's happened is the Democratic Party nationwide, not just in Virginia, has moved over pretty solidly to the strong gun control camp. I mean, they're talking about passing laws that are involving confiscation of guns. They're talking about, laws that are going to make it much more costly for people to be able to go and buy guns. Just pricing them out of the ability for poor individuals to be able to go and own guns for protection. There's a whole range, like 12 different types of bills, which the governor is endorsing and looks likely they're going to pass. I testified before the Virginia State House and Senate last January, and it was pretty clear that all the Democrats were going to vote one way, and the Republicans held together on the other side. And whether you have the fact that you have Democrats in control now, pretty much are going to determine what's going to happen. And I don't really see really any defections from what I hear on the Democratic side on this.
Do you think there's been talk about calling out the National Guard to confiscate so-called assault weapons? Do you think that's a realistic possibility? You think they would try it?
Well, I think what's going to happen is I don't think they're going to have to go that far. Sheriffs are basically basically creatures of the state. I mean, their offices are put in by state legislation, and if sheriffs refuse to enforce the state law, the governor basically has two options, and the attorney general, who's also a Democrat, have two options. Either one, they can ask the state police to enforce it, or two, they can put the sheriffs in jail. And when the deputy sheriff takes over, if he refuses to do it, they can put him in jail, and they can keep on going down the list until they have people who are willing to enforce the state law that's there. It seems that the governor and the attorney general in the state are willing to go a long ways down that road. Now, who knows about individual sheriffs, whether just the threat of jail will cause a couple of them to switch? I have no idea. It's a process we'll have to see, but I'm not sure that they'll have to call out the National Guard. I mean, one thing is clear: the governor has asked for significantly more prison funds in his budget that he's proposing to go and arrest and put people in jail for violating the new gun control laws. They're going to be in place, so they're going to be they're anticipating putting a number of people in jail.
I think they're bluffing. I just don't see that they're going to take this on. I think it's eventually going to be a loser. I think the sheriffs are going to hold tight. I mean, it's so widespread, the opposition to it, except for a few more urbanized counties. And if they stick together, it's going to be they're going to be hard pressed to actually implement this.
Well, I mean, you may be right, but there's going to be a little bit of brinkmanship here. And I don't know, when I was before the state legislature last year, it was pretty clear you had a lot of true believers in terms of gun control on the Democratic side. And I mean, it was just amazing. They didn't really care about the cost or the prices or whether these things, what the evidence was that these things worked or not. I'll just give you a simple example. One of the things I was asked to talk about was basically two things. These background checks on the private transfers of guns and these red flag laws. And on the private transfers of guns, I said, look, if you want to have those types of regulations, it's easy enough to pass them without generating a lot of changes. One of the changes is who pays for this. In Washington, D.C., where they have these background checks on private transfers of a gun, it costs $125 to privately transfer a gun. Well, that may not stop you or I from doing it, but a poor individual, poor black who, let's say, lives in a high-crime urban area, $125 effective tax may make the difference between they legally buy a gun or not. Well, and if you want to encourage people to go and do these background checks, do you really want to make them pay $125 for doing what you want them to do? I mean, if anything, you may want to pay them to do it, but you surely don't want to make them have to pay these big fees for going and doing these background checks. So pay for it out of general revenue. If you really believe that this reduces crime, and I don't, and I'm happy to talk about why, but if you really believe this, as these Democrats claim that they do, then pay for it out of general revenue if you think the benefit's greater than the cost. The other reason for paying out of general revenue is that if you believe it reduces crime, it reduces crime for everyone, not just the law-abiding individual who's going out of their way to obey the law there. And if you believe everybody benefits, then everybody should pay. Why make, let's say a poor individual who's trying to buy a gun to protect themselves and their family bear the entire burden of the cost of this background check? So if you were to offer to pay for these things out of general revenue, since everybody supposedly benefits according to you, and also you're trying to encourage people to go and do these background checks rather than taxing them for doing it, you would eliminate a good portion of the opposition to this law. But they're strongly against that. I think the main reason why they're against it is because they're not really interested in the background checks themselves. They mainly just want to make it costly for people, particularly poor people, to be able to go and buy guns. The other thing that could easily be fixed are the mistakes in the system. So one of the things you're going to be hearing from Democrats in the state legislature there is that the claim that 3.5 million dangerous, prohibited people have been stopped from buying guns because of background checks. But that's simply false. What they should say is that there have been 3.5 million initial denials. And virtually all of those, something like 99% of them, are mistakes. You know, when you go and you buy a gun, you put down your name, your social security number, your address, your birth date, your race, your eye color. You think they're using all that information. They're not. They use things like roughly phonetically similar names and similar birthdays. Well, and the thing is, who mainly gets hurt by that? It's basically poor Blacks, poor Hispanics. People tend to have names similar to others in their racial group. Hispanics have names similar to other Hispanics. Blacks tend to have names similar to other Blacks. Well, there's no reason for those mistakes. If companies did background checks in the same way that the government does criminal background checks, the companies under federal law would be sued out of existence. Simply make it so that the federal government has to meet the same requirements for doing background checks that the government requires that private companies have to meet. Can you imagine a businessman going and looking at roughly phonetically similar names and doing a background check on employees? I mean, if you told a business owner to do that, they'd look at you like you were from Mars. And, the state can go and do things. They can require that background checks have all the information that it's provided and using it as exactly as it's provided to them. But they'll fight you against that too. They'll fight you against requiring that the federal government has to meet the same restrictions in doing background checks that private companies have to meet. Again, it seems like an easy no-brainer to me. But I think it gets to the fact that a lot of these regulations are mainly done to make it difficult for law-abiding citizens to own guns more than they are to reduce crime. Because they could get these through if they just were willing to make a couple simple changes to the law.
So what do you think is going to be the upshot of this? Is it going to go to the Supreme Court? I mean, because I don't think calling the National Guard is a solution. I think the federal government will intercede at that point. Trump will federalize the National Guard to stop it from being perverted. And already many National Guardsmen have said they're not doing it. So that's not really an option. So what's really going to happen here?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Osino Resources is a Ross Beatty-backed gold exploration company in mining-friendly Namibia. Osino's district-scale land package is situated near 2 producing gold mines, one of which Osino's management team previously developed and sold to B2 Gold. Osino's founders and management are experienced mining professionals who have already successfully developed and sold 2 companies in the past 7 years. Osino has an excellent shareholder base with Ross Beatty owning 20%, insiders 5%, and Resource Capital Funds 8%. This is an exploration company with drills turning that you'll definitely want to pay attention to. Osino trades in New York under the ticker OSIIF and in Toronto under the ticker OSI. To learn more, go to osinoresources.com. That's osinoresources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, I mean, I don't think the Supreme Court's going to strike down background check regulations, even if it makes it costly for law-abiding citizens to be able to go and get guns. I don't think that's the type of case that's going to go to the Supreme Court right now. Maybe if you had like 8 Republicans and 1 Democrat on the Supreme Court, maybe you might win something like that. But, I think, who knows what's going to happen. I think they're going to pass a lot of these laws, and I think it's something that's going to be battled for a while. I don't think there's going to be an easy solution to it. I wish there was, but you have the Attorney General there in the state is a really diehard left-wing.
Yeah.
He cares passionately about these regulations, and I don't think he's going to back down. I guess the question is, how many of these sheriffs are going to be willing to kind of stick it out and be willing to go to jail.
I think more of them than you might think. So, and the vehemence of the opposition. Now, look, we don't know what's going to happen, but the vehemence, the idea of banning privately owned shooting ranges, target ranges, these things are completely absurd on their face.
Right. Well, there's one law that's being proposed that the governor seems to like that would essentially make it a felony for you to go and teach somebody else how to go and use a gun. I mean, hopefully something like that is just been poorly drafted and they didn't really mean to have something like that. You would hope that the governor would have checked that carefully before he would go and endorse the bill. But, you hope at some point things like that will be pointed out and, will be amended. But I'm not even sure the point of even putting forward what they put forward there. But, hopefully some cooler heads will prevail. But I've talked to a lot of these people before, and I've seen the reactions that they've had, even what I consider to be reasonable suggestions as I've just gone through in terms of reforms for these laws. And I just don't think that no matter what types of reasonable proposals you put forward, that they're going to be accepting them.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably correct on that. And we will see what is sustained by the Supreme Court and what is struck down. If it's one bill, the whole thing might be struck down. You never know. But I think a lot of this is just going too far, and the people of Virginia are just not going to put up with it. But hey, surprises happen.
Well, elections have consequences.
Yeah, well.
And I suppose one thing about Virginia, it provides a wake-up call for the rest of the country about, what actually matters in terms of the November election that's going to be coming up this year.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, probably going to be a new Supreme Court judge appointed at some point, right? And that will have consequences as well. We're seeing that the federal judiciary is being remade by Donald Trump. Hundreds of judges, almost 200 judges appointed so far, and a bunch of U.S. courts of appeal have been flipped from Democrat to Republican. And presuming, well, for the coming year, there's 20, 30 more judges that will probably be appointed, perhaps more. And presuming that Trump is reelected, we'll see a further shift in the courts. And that's kind of where we're going to be left.
Part of the shift is just bringing things into balance. I mean, the Democrats had huge majorities on the appeals courts, and they had huge majorities for district court judges. And, right now, basically their Democrats are still ahead in terms of controlling appeals courts. You're going to need another term to kind of bring that the rest of the way into balance there. So it's true, Trump's been able to put a lot of judges on the appeals courts, but you had Democrats controlled the vast majority of appeals courts prior to Trump being elected. So it took a lot of effort just to begin to bring things into balance.
Yep. Well, hey, Trump's been getting some favorable decisions, even from the Ninth Circuit. That one's about to flip. We get to the end of 2020. Even if Trump isn't reelected, there's going to be a lot more originalist conservative
I think
judges.
The Democrats still have a 3-vote. The Democrats still have a 3-vote majority on the Ninth Circuit.
Oh yeah, correct.
There are no vacancies there that would allow him to flip it this year. I think in order for Trump to bring the Ninth Circuit into balance, it would be sometime during a second term for Trump before that would happen. And even the district or the appeals courts that Trump has flipped to kind of bring the overall number into balance, the Republicans may have like a 1-seat majority in a number of those. And so if a Democrat were to win the presidency, those would quickly flip back.
Yeah, perhaps. Well, we're expecting him to win. There's one vacancy on the U.S. Court of Appeals right now. There are 70 U.S. District Court judgeships vacant. We can presume that most, if not all, will be filled in 2020. Then there's a couple of other courts that nobody really cares about, but that are important. But altogether, there's 81 vacancies. And then we've got bankruptcy courts and immigration courts, which really aren't the same type of courts as the district courts. They're lesser courts, if you will. And
sure.
So the process continues in all likelihood. We'll see what happens with the election in November. But this is a case of Democrats gone wild. And we see this a lot. Hey, John, we want to find out more about you, connect with you on the web. Where's the best place to look you up these days?
Our website, crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org for the Crime Prevention Research Center, just crimeresearch.org.
Right. All right. And there's a link to that in the show notes. Just click it, take you over there. Hey, questions, comments for John or myself, just email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network, and of course our home site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter. John, as always, a pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for being there, Kerry. I appreciate it also.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.